Skin People articles and reports from Burlington News Network. The Blue People, Mary Sutherland, linking the Blue People to the fallen angels and the El God. Although mankind has technically progressed since the days of Abraham, I question our intellectual progression. Monday through Saturday our reality is tunnel-visioned into what we see, touch and feel, and then Sunday rolls around and off we go to worship an invisible God and his hierarchy of equally invisible angels. Through the week, man shuts his ears and eyes and perception off to the voices and presence of the invisible ones, and will go to church and listen to a pastor relay the messages of those in the past that had not closed their ears and eyes and perception off to what they called lords, angels, devils and demons. The foundation of the church is based on faith and teaches us to believe in entities we cannot see. Physically speaking, this type of instruction is almost laughable. But metaphysically this opens up a whole new world. A world of possible impossibilities, a world of gods, angels, demons, elementals, interdimensional creatures, inner earth beings and UFOs. By using biblical text and an open mind, the illusion of God and the angels is dropped and reality sets in. A reality that shows God and his angels or Elohim as extraterrestrial humanoids known as the ELS who had some very advanced technology as well as occult knowledge. The root word El is found in the word Ang, El, Elohim on the angelic names of Samu, El, Rapha, El, Gabri, El, Micah, El, etc. Genesis describes their Elohim on Els as giant on stature who walked and dealt with man and procreated with the women of earth. Based off this biblical description, we know them as giants who had a digestive system, reproductive organs and fertile. They also appeared like men dressed in shining garments. Luke 24:4. The book of Numbers describes how they live amongst us without being seen by man, yet perceived by animals. Book of Numbers 22:23-31. Now, the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his sword drawn in his hand, and the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So Balaam, not being able to see the angel, struck the donkey to turn her back onto the road. Going on in Book of Numbers, it reads, Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed his head and fell flat on his face. Kings 6:17 records Elisha's request to have a man's eyes opened, and it was granted, and he saw things he formerly could not. And Elisha prayed, and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. The Bible states that the angels walked with men and taught them the arts, math, astrology, husbandry, medicine, the skills of making metal, etc. And according to ancient texts, the people of Atlantis received their knowledge from the sunken continent of Lemuria. Mark S. Miller, a student of anthropology for over 30 years, stumbled across a reference to a former race of humanoids who were described as blue. It was through Mark Miller that I learned there was not just 4 races of mankind, but 5 races. The 5th race, known as the Blue Movians, lived on an unknown continent in the middle of the ocean between Asia and Europe. This, according to all the old maps, was Lemuria. The Blue Movians fit the description of the biblical angels, described as very tall, thin, with extremely large heads. They possessed all manners of powers of the mind, teleportation, telekinesis and ESP. According to some ancient texts, one day, for reasons known only to them, they conveyed to the humans of Earth that they had, through their powers of astral projection, located a planet more suitable to their needs in a far distant solar system or galaxy and departed Earth. Miller believes that each and everyone disappeared from the face of the Earth, teleporting themselves to this faraway planet. I submit that there were those that had fallen to the lower vibrations of the Earth and were or could not leave this plane, thus bound to this Earth, one of those places they called hell. This supposedly occurred about 60,000 BC. In my research, I always watch for the root words as clues to the lost knowledge, and in the root of Nor I found the missing link to the Blue Movians and the latter, Nordics, in a little-known Norwegian myth about a rarely seen island the locals call Formatilda or Cloud Island. It is supposedly 400 or so miles from the shores of Skanezatild due east from the tip of hell. That's right, hell. It is called Cloud Island because, when it is seen, it is perpetually shrouded in a cloud cover. How many of us researchers have heard the story of UFOs hiding themselves in a cloud? This place, again like the legends of Shambhala, has the ability to veil itself from the eyes of humans. It holds no place on any map because the actual distance is unknown. The island cannot be seen from above, despite numerous attempts, and no one can prove that they've actually set foot on its shores. If it has any, only treacherous cliffs are observed, and none has reached it or even gone all the way around it. The main reason it isn't included on any map are the many superstitions related to the island and its inhabitants. In the villages, tales are told about fishing voyages in proximity of this mysterious island, seeing strange, dark ships in its waters with crews of very tall people in equally mysterious garments that shimmer. Refer back to the description of the garments of the angels at a tomb of Jesus in Luke 24:4. These crewmen have been reported to have a low blue tint to their skins. The people of the area call them Delvinar. Any attempts to approach the island are thwarted by the ocean herself, never allowing the ships to get closer than 100 or so miles. No structures of any kind have ever been observed. No empirical clues of habitation except for those dark ships. Even through binoculars, the ships are always seen barely out of focus, surrounded in fog and mist from the sea. The fishermen of the villages believe that these people are blue-toned supernatural humanoids, angels, and stay clear from the island. Despite the excellent fishing conditions, explorer Jacques Cousteau once boasted about coming in contact with a similar people. His description of the blue people he saw is smaller in stature, roughly the height of an average human. However, these people may have been the descendants of the Blue-Movians, as I will get to later on in this article. There were papers found in a chest belonging to a Norseman, which told a story about a fishing vessel that was lost to a fierce storm decades ago. Of the 30-man crew, only 2 survived. After being found by some locals, several days later, the survivors told an incredible story of being rescued at sea by tall, muscular, dark blue men who yanked them from the freezing waters and brought them aboard their ship, made of a black wood that neither of them had seen before. Their rescuers wore long coats with high collars, made of a material that appeared to shimmer black and blue as it moved in the wind. The men were bald but had shiny black hair from the base of the skull and fan outward a bit. Some wore a black metallic band around their foreheads with unknown markings etched in them. Others had hats with rounded top and wide brims, and all wore belts with strange objects attached. Their eyes were dark as midnight under low arches and a hint of a brow. They were never spoken to directly at first, but could hear mumblings in a language they were not familiar with as their rescuers conversed amongst themselves. The men were stowed in a small room below deck with little light emanating from unseen lamps. The room itself held nothing but cushions atop a dark rug, ornately decorated with silver designs. Again, like nothing they had seen before, they were silently given fresh water, thick blankets, and a plate of meat and fruit. After some hours, the doors to the hatch were opened and sunlight streamed in. They were gently taken by the arm and led off the vessel and into a smaller boat of the same design. That boat appeared to be docked between 2 high cliffs in a narrow bay that tapered off into the distance and seemed to have no end. One of the rescued men glanced up at the cliffs and swore he saw windows and doors with light pouring out from them, but that could not be accessible from the bay itself, being hundreds of feet above their position. One Delvinar finally spoke to them, saying, in perfect Norska, "We will take you home now." It was then that the men noticed his rescuer's skin closely matched that of his long coat, subtly changing hue from the darker blue to slightly lighter shades, as ripples across a pond. They thought it might be a reflection from the sea, but their position on the boat betrayed that thought, as the edge of the boat was a few feet away. The Delvinar's voice was low and melodic, making the 2 men feel drowsy. They felt a warm mist envelop them until they then found themselves in the forest a few miles from their village. From that day on, the villagers swore to leave the island in peace and never discuss it with outsiders. Could this be the lands of hell? From the books of the Israelites we have our legends of the angels, but there are other ancient books that describe such spiritual beings, and they are depicted as having a blue tint to their skin. The Bhagavad Gita supports a very ancient race of a blue-skinned race with its stories of Lord Krishna. Instead of being an angel, Krishna was described like that of an avatar, God or demigod. According to the Bhagavad Gita, he was a teacher who taught the workings of creation and gave an understanding of a self-realized soul. He taught the people the science of yoga in all its forms — the path of work, the path of knowledge, the path of mysticism, the path of devotion. He was also depicted with blue skin. Shiva is also depicted as dark blue. I know David de Gruff brings up another interesting angel from my research of this blue race. This was the Ainu, who were an indigenous people living in Japan whose skin hue is often described as blue. The blue fats of Kentucky. Modern medicine would like to write this off as a disease of sorts. The Smithsonian even tried to pass it off as but I believe that this race of people did exist and that their existence appeared from time to time time through a recessive gene. Evidence of this may be found in the lineage of the Blue Fugate families in Kentucky. Special thank you to Glenn Ravenwood for pointing me in the right direction in my search for the mysterious Blue People of the Cherokee legends. Reference. Adapted from an article in Science 82, November 1982 by Kathy Trost. For more information on the Blue Fugates of Kentucky, go to google.com and type in Blue Fugates. It all started over 6 generations ago after a French orphan named Martin Fugate claimed a land grant in 1820 and settled on the banks of eastern Kentucky's Troublesome Creek, with his red-headed American bride, the former Elizabeth Smith, whose skin was as pale as the mountain laurel that blooms every spring around the creek hollows. The Fugates had 7 children. 4 were reported to be blue. The clan kept multiplying. Fugates married other Fugates. Sometimes they married first cousins, and they married the people who lived closest to them. The Combses, Smiths, Richies, and Stacys all lived in isolation from the world, bunched in log cabins up and down the hollows. And so it was only natural that a boy married the girl next door, even if she had the same last name. When they settled this country back then, there was no roads. It was hard to get out, so they intermarried, says Dennis Stacy, who counts Fugate blood in his own veins. Martin and Elizabeth Fugate's blue children multiplied in this natural isolation tank. The marriage of one of their blue boys, Zachariah, to his mother's sister triggered the line of succession that would result in the birth, more than 100 years later, of Benji Stacy. When Benji was born with purple skin, his relatives told the perplexed doctors about his great-grandmother Luna Fugate. One relative described her as blue all over and another calls Luna the bluest woman I ever saw. Luna's father, Levi Fugate, was one of Zachariah Fugate's sons. Levi married a Ritchie girl and bought 200 acres of rolling land along Ball Creek. The couple had 8 children, including Luna. A fellow by the name of John Stacy spotted Luna at Sunday services of the old regular Baptist church before the turn of the century. Stacy courted her, married her, and moved from Troublesome Creek to make a living in timber on her daddy's land. John Stacy still lives on Lick Branch of Ball Creek. Stacy recalls that his father-in-law, Levi Fugate, was part of the family that showed blue. All them old fellas way back then was blue. One of them, I remember seeing him when I was just a boy. Blue Ants, they called him. Most of them old people live by that name, the Blue Fugates. It run in that generation who lived up and down Ball Creek. They looked like anybody else, except they had the blue color. Stacy said, the bluest Fugates I ever saw was Luna and her kin, said Carrie Lee Kilburn, a nurse at the rural medical center called Home Place Center. Luna was bluish all over. Her lips were as dark as a bruise. She was as blue a woman as I ever saw. Luna Stacy possessed the good health common to the blue people, bearing at least 13 children before she died at 84. The clinic rarely saw her, and never for anything serious. Benji Stacy was born in a modern hospital near Hazard, Kentucky, not far from Troublesome Creek. He inherited his father's lankiness and his mother's red hair, but what he got from his great-great-grandfather was dark blue skin. The doctors were astonished, not so the parents, but the boy was rushed off to a medical clinic in Lexington, University of Kentucky Medical School. 2 days of tests showed no cause for Benji's blue skin. Benji's grandmother Stacy asked the doctors if they had heard of the Blue Fugates of Troublesome Creek. Put on that track, they concluded that Benji's condition was inherited. Benji lost his blue tint within a few weeks, and now he is about as normal a 7-year-old boy as you might imagine. His lips and fingernails still turn a purplish blue when he gets cold or angry, and that trait was exploited by the medical students back when Benji was an infant. I believe that this family carried the recessive gene of an ancient race that we thought left our Earth plain thousands of years ago. Several years ago, I came across a report done by the British on the Native American Indian. According to the report, the Cherokee talked of these blue-skinned people that lived on the land before the Cherokee. It was reported that the Cherokee wiped them out. Through an interview I did with Blue Otter, Cherokee Indian himself and author of Prophecy Keepers, I found out that these blue-skinned people were not wiped out but lived in the caves below the surface of the earth. He told me that the Cherokee accounts tell that when they came into this land, they found many gardens but not the people that would have tended to the gardens. Later they found that these people of the gardens lived underground and came out only at night to tend the gardens. The food was harvested and then taken back underground to the homes they had there. These people had blue skin, large eyes. The sun rays were too harsh for them on the surface, so they chose to live underground away from the harsh rays of the sun and only come out at night using the light of the moon. The Cherokee called them the Moon People, although it was assumed that this race of blue-skinned people were wiped out by the Cherokee. We discovered recently that this may not be true. Several men were exploring some deep caves in Arkansas. After going down so deep, someone or thing started throwing rocks at them, apparently attempting to discourage them from going any deeper into the cave. The men scared off whatever or whoever it was that were throwing the stones and continued to go down deeper. After about 1 mile down into the cave, they came upon some plastic-type dance-bearing tubes. At this point they could not go any further, but they could see a city on the other side and saw several people with blue skin. Berbers of the Sahara. Berbers of the Sahara, numbering close to 2 million. They have preserved their ancient alphabet, which is related to that used by ancient Libyans. The Tuaregs traditionally maintained a feudal system consisting of a small number of noble families, a large majority of vassals, and a lower class of black non-Tuareg serfs, who performed the agricultural tasks. The upper classes, organized in tribes, convoyed caravans and, until subdued by France, were feared as raiders. The fiercely independent Tuareg resented European hegemony in Africa, and they long resisted conquest. Tuareg men go veiled, while the women are unveiled. Women enjoy respect and freedom, and descent and inheritance are through the female line. Though nominally Muslim, the people still retain many pre-Islamic rites and customs. The traditional way of life for the Tuaregs, for example, raiding neighboring tribes, leading caravans, and exacting taxes from trans-Sahara travelers, has changed, according to a few obscure references to the Tuareg in the manuscripts of Sadi Cheval, from which this legend surfaces, as well as the stories best for had told. There is a link between these people and the Delvenar. They are often referred to as the Blue Men of the Desert. Cheval provides no further details other than the word Tuareg, at least that I have yet found. Much more to go through. Anyway, I find it fascinating that these particular Muslims operate rather in the reverse of the traditional Muslim and matriarchal foundation, which could also link them back to the Lemurians. The Anishinaabe Nation prophecy of the Blue People. According to the prophecy, there are 4 groups of people: the red, the yellow, the black and the white. Korchin says that from today's youth a new group of people will be born, the Blue People, who will be tolerant of each other, and will bring spiritual harmony and sacredness back to the earth. This will prepare the way for a rebirth of Mother Earth. The straight dope. As a student of anthropology some 30 years ago, I stumbled across reference to a former race of humanoids who were blue. Once, in addition to the 4 known races of mankind, there was a 5th race that dwelled on an unknown continent in the middle of the ocean between Asia and Europe, that is, North America. This race, the most ancient of all, was called the Blue Movians. They were very tall, about 7 feet, and very thin, and had extremely large heads. They possessed all manners of powers of the mind, teleportation, telekinesis, ESP. One day, in response to a stimulus known only to them, they conveyed to regular humans that they had, through their powers of astral projection, located a planet more suitable to their needs in a far distant solar system or galaxy. And all at once they each and every one disappeared from the face of the earth and teleported themselves there, never to be seen or heard from again. This supposedly occurred about 60,000 BC. Mark S. Miller - my husband swears that when he took anthropology they talked about a race of blue people, Loneo, via AOL. The Picts were an early race of Scotsmen who fought naked and painted themselves blue with woad. They were known as the Blue People. Tom Reamers - you completely missed the Ainu, an indigenous people living in Japan whose skin hue is often described as blue. David de Graaf - in Irish Scottish Guild, or Gaelic, people of African descent were historically referred to as the Fergorum, or blue men. People of this race were described as blue rather than as black. Ed O'Neill. Update. February 2009. When the Cherokee migrated to Tennessee, they found the region inhabited by a race of blue-skinned little people, who they called the Moon Eye. Their eyes were very large and sensitive to light. They lived in the earth below. They had their gardens on the surface and would come out only at night to tend to them. Benjamin Smith Barton's New Views of the Origins of the Tribes and Nations of America, 1798. Blue Race aka Star Warriors. Moon Eye's description. The Blues are said to have translucent skin, large almond-shaped eyes, extremely sensitive to light, and small of stature. Origin. They claim to be descendants of Noah, who traveled to the Western Hemisphere a few centuries following the deluge and discovered ancient antediluvian cavern systems and ancient technologies which had been abandoned by the antediluvians in deep subterranean recesses. They have been encountered mostly in deep cavern systems beneath the general region of the Ozarks, Arkansas and surrounding regions. Attitude. These peaceful people may, according to some accounts, be allied to the Nordics and all blondes. Witness allegedly encountered on the moon by our US astronauts according to John Lear and others. According to Morningsky, Hopi/Apache dancer, the first alien contact started about 1947 to 1948 with the Greys contacting the US government to form a treaty with them. Another body of aliens arrive, called the Blues. The Blues advised the government not to deal with the Greys, saying it would only lead to disaster. They told the US to follow your own path. They said they would teach with peace and harmony if men would disarm and listen. The military said no deal. This information can also be verified through the MJ-12 papers, so they left. But a few decided to remain and stayed in northern Mexico and Arizona and made a treaty with the Hopi Indians. These aliens are known by the Hopi as Star Warriors. The Greys started monitoring the Blues, so the Blues had to flee the reservation and go into hiding. A few of the elders went with them. The Hopi legend is that there were two races, the children of the feather who came from the skies, and the children of the reptile who came from under the earth. The children of the reptile chased the Hopi Indians out of the earth. These evil. Please take notice. I received this email in February 2, 2006. In your research of the blue people, you may want to adjust what I have written to the corrections stated below. Thank you.